I am Dawn Renee Bova, and I am joined today by Mielle Fox, who is a fellow podcaster. She is very insightful. She has a lot of knowledge about the numerology, and I'm really excited for you guys to get to know her a little better. Before we get started today, I have a big favor to ask. I'm asking everyone who listens or watches this podcast to leave a rating. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like this podcast, and share it with your friends. That really does help me, and I have a goal of 500 followers by June. Let's make it happen. I really want you to expound because I know you went through a lot of trauma with the loss of your
Mm,
brother. And if you want to share some of the things that you
sure,
did to help
sure.
you through that,
Yeah,
because I know that you're offering that to other people too. So I think that's
sure.
really
Yeah.
exciting.
So, um, I am kind of the ultimate blend of science and spiritual. I am extremely sciencey based, very analytical. I work in oral health care during the day, so it's not like I'm just sort of off the charts and none of this has any backing to it. So there's that side of me. I'm also extremely spiritual because I am very in touch with my gut, my intuition, my higher self. So when I'm able to open that piece of me and be versus do, it allows information to come through. For me, I've learned how to trust my intuition. And when you said, wow, people would say XYZ, the visionaries, the psychics, the mediums, whomever that may be, and that made sense to you. The reason it made sense to you is because it was speaking the truth to your heart. There's that piece of it. I happen to really love numbers. That's the geeky part of me. I'm really into science and numbers, and I'm fascinated by the energetics of numerology. So, in a nutshell, everything contains energy. And, if you want, at some point, we'll go down the quantum physics rabbit hole, which is really a lot of fun to me, but, that's just
Me
me.
too.
Um, I know. I'm like, woo. But everything is energy. Everything contains energy. Pretty much the entire existence that we on 3D Earth experience is 99.999% energy, which means it's a big old wave pattern of energy. We literally project what shows up in our world. The reason it's such a big stink to be aligned, or I think we're always aligned, but again, it's the scenario of remove the clouds to see the sun. We are aligned, but the problem is we've covered up the aligned with all the bunk. And so now when you uncover the bunk, now you are actually realigned because it's already there. It's already there. It's just getting in sync with it. It's just tuning into it. I'll tell you a little backstory. Otherwise we'll be talking all night. But here's the backstory. My brother and I were extremely, extremely, extremely close, even though we didn't always stay in the same space. He moved on, and I lived in one place. He lived in another place. 2020, he took ill very suddenly, and his illness was related to a lifetime of kind of ignoring who he was, being kind of held back, held down by many fears, conditioning, programs, patterns, behaviors, where it ultimately took a toll on his body. That was ultimately his final demise. So I got the phone call, go to the hospital, and I flew across the country to get there. He was not in very good shape when I arrived, and he was not getting any better, to the place where we really had to have a conversation about, you're not really leaving. Like, you're not leaving the hospital. You may be leaving Earth, but you're not leaving the hospital, which I will have to say I'm going to tell you, is probably the hardest conversation I've ever had. I've sat with people as they've left this earth. That's a very different event than sitting with somebody who is in a place of leaving Earth, not necessarily at a time that they anticipated. Need to actually have it explained, like, you're not leaving the hospital room, my friend. Here we go. You are going to need to make a decision. Really hard. That's a brutal conversation because it's a heart-to-heart event. At the time, my brother did not have any verbal capacity. He could blink his eyes and that was it. For 3.5 days, we literally held conversations, me looking at him, me talking, and just tuning in and literally having conversation without words coming out. So, what is my point? My point is, why were we able to experience that? Because the language of who we are and what we are soul to soul on this earth isn't English or Swahili or painting or dancing or numbers or stars. Those are examples of how we understand the language of energy. But the reality is, how we really communicate on a cellular level is just flat out energy. And so for
Mhm.
me, numerology happens to be my gig. I think it's just that's what turns my crank. And the course Reader's Digest version is that we are all born into our human body on a particular date of birth. And there are energetic expressions affiliated with that date of birth that can be translated, if you want to call it that, into sort of a playbook of how could you anticipate your life path moving forward. It is basically like forecasting the weather. There's a capacity to take a look at the energetics through the numbers, and it doesn't mean something will happen, but it certainly allows you to have an idea of what that energetic field will be at any given time of the year, so you can sort of prepare yourself. It's like saying, there's a 60% chance of rain. Well, if you know that ahead of time, you might actually put your umbrella in the car. Whereas if you have no clue, you might end up getting soaking wet. Numerologic forecasting just sort of gives you a window of anticipated capacity to make certain choices and decisions. Back
Right.
to the original question was, how did I use this and what did I do as I worked through a lot of the issues and the grief with my brother? I will tell you flat out, I experienced tremendous guilt and tremendous shame. And I beat myself up for quite a long time about, why didn't I know sooner? Why didn't I do more? How could I have made a difference? Would it have been different if I had, whatever, lived closer, shown up? And the reality is, you can love somebody to the endless nth degree, but you cannot walk their path. You cannot fix them. You cannot give them, and it's sort of the horse to the well scenario. You can bring a horse to the water trough, but you can't make it drink. You can talk until you're blue to somebody and say, look at all what's available to you. Look at how things are. This is what's here for you. That's all great, which is what I do on a regular basis. Let me be your awareness navigator and share with you and show you what might be available and possible should you choose to, just like the Mission Impossible, should you choose to take the challenge, right? Should you as an individual choose to step up and say, I'm not living with this old junk. I'm not living with these stories. I'm going to tap in to my greatest, purest piece of who I am at my core so I can live the best version of me, the most joyful and blissful existence. So, the hardest part of kind of what I do is, I'm not fixing anybody. I'm
Mm.
just sort of like the conduit of awareness. I'm just here to say, hey, listen, have you thought about maybe being curious? It could look like this, it could look like that. I can walk part of your journey with you if you so desire. But at the end of the day, this is on you, because the truth is, transformation and growth is an inside job.
Right.
That's really what it is.
When you were talking, I related so much with when Brad died, that grief and that shame. And if I would have done this, and I should have called this, and I should have done this. And I struggled with that for a long time. But I think
Mhm.
what's important for people to understand is that once you start putting these tools in your tool belt, it does become easier. When
Mhm.
Willie died, he was at the hospital for about a week, and I stayed there with him quite a bit. His mom and dad stayed a night or two, but they were so devastated that it was really difficult for them to stay in that hospital. He was
Mhm.
listless, lifeless, but he was still physically here. I worked through a lot of emotions really quickly. I worked
Oh,
through
yes.
the guilt. I'm the one that found the babysitter for him. What if I hadn't done that? I worked through all of that stuff, and I cried, and I caressed his little curls and hugged him. I released it. so much faster. Now, that doesn't mean that I still don't have those periods where
Oh,
the grief
sure.
just gobsmacks you, right? And you're
Oh,
down for a
yeah.
little bit. But I want people to know that once you start implementing these tools that are available to everyone and put them into use in your life, you can move through these periods of tragedy, grief, loss, fear, shame, guilt really quickly. I tell
Mhm,
people I'm a good bouncer backer,
mhm,
and that's because I use these tools. When I hear people say that they've been in therapy for years, and maybe they need that, maybe that's a lifeline for them. I don't want to knock that.
mhm.
But for me, I've implemented the tools and I keep using and I keep growing and I get better and better and better at it. Because, like you said, it's an inside job.
Oh, yes.
You get these tools, you use them, you implement them, sky's the limit.
And again, to bring it full circle to where we started at the beginning of this, those folks that have been a part of our lives and have now left, who are no
Mm,
longer physically here. At some other podcast, we'll get into what that really means in terms of numbers. It's called soul contracts, but that's not for here. But anyway, their spirit, their essence, their soul does not want for you to spend the remainder of your earthly time here in a state of despair and grief and black hole.
yeah.
They want for you to move through and forward with joy, with happiness, with all the things that are birthrighted to us. I don't mean this disrespectfully to anybody because I think everybody experiences a loss in a different way. So I don't say
Right.
this with any disrespect at all, but understand if this is what one chooses to believe. What is grieving? The grieving is your human.
Mhm.
Your soul understands clearly that it is connected to all the other souls, those alive and those no longer here. The soul is the soul. The soul, it's energy. It does
Mm,
not go away. It does not diminish. It simply transmutes. It's here in a human body. When the human body piece is see it done by at whatever age it is, that soul isn't less or more. The only difference is it's had the clouds removed and now it can express itself in the purity of what it is, which is divine love.
yeah.
So, for example, for my brother and probably for your Brad, their human expression was tortured by a variety of, I'm going to call them negative impacts, whether those were self beliefs or using various products to numb emotions, fears, lack of self worth, whatever all those things that we humanly experience, your
Mhm.
soul doesn't experience that. Your human does, but your soul does not.
Right.
So when that is released after our loved one has moved on to the next, they are in the purest expression of who and what they were, are, and ever will be,
Yeah.
because that is transmuted. It is never destroyed. So with full respect to everybody, that deep, dark difficulty that we experience with that grief and then learning how to use the tools to find the joy and still exist with it, but not lose ourselves in it and really fulfill the service and purpose for which we are here on earth, which is your birthright of joy, your birthright of receivership, all the things. There at some level needs to be the awareness, what is my soul feeling and what is my human feeling?
Willie, who was an innocent little child, he didn't put negative substances in his body. He didn't have the guilt, shame. He was just a happy little almost 2.
Mhm,
But in that same respect, he was in a human body having human experiences, and I truly believe once we are released from this human body, we keep going. They are in utopia, freedom,
mhm,
can be anywhere,
mhm,
anytime, anything,
mhm.
total bliss, happiness, joy, which is what we all want for them. It's just our humanness that misses their physical presence. And
Absolutely. And
when I
that's
really
normal,
yeah, and when I really
and it's
concentrate
okay.
on right, it is. I mean, you have to go through it. There's no way around it. You have to go through it. It's important to give people hope that there is light on the other side, and you will and you can start to experience this peace that our loved ones aren't gone. They're around just in a different
Mhm.
way
In a
than
different form. Yes.
different form. I did have one dream, and I don't believe that it was a dream. This is just me, but it was early on after Brad had passed. I actually fell asleep crying with tears
Mm.
streaming down my face. I never cried so much. I didn't think the body could produce that many tears. I felt this wiping of my cheek. I thought it was my husband, and I was kind of mad at him for something. I don't even know what because your emotions are everywhere at that time. And I was like, "Quit it. Stop. Just leave me alone." And then I woke up. Nobody was there. And I just had this knowing that it was Brad wiping my
Mhm.
tears. And I know that he wants me to be happy. And same with Willie. He wants his parents to be happy. Shortly before he passed, we had this I have like these crystals hanging in the window in the living room, and the sun was shining in, and these light beams were dancing around on the living room floor. And Willie was mesmerized by these light beams. He just kept following them. And I mean, he just kept playing and playing with these light beams. Lacey had talked to somebody, a medium, whatever. I don't know what you want to call it. But anyway, this woman said to her, I don't know, like when you see a light beam shining in through the window or the light beams dancing around, he wants you to know that that's him. And the correlation, that's why I think the psychics, the mediums, I mean, they can be so helpful when you open
They
yourself
can.
up to see.
That's the key.
Mhm.
You have to be willing to open yourself up. See through your heart, not through your head. Yeah.
Right. How can people
Yeah.
find you? And I will have a link in the show notes, but I want people
Sure.
to be able to find you if they want to have some type of mentorship.
Like, I'm all over the place. But let's see. The website is called foxdenenergetics.com. The private Facebook group, same name, Foxden Energetics. The timeline Facebook and Instagram is just Mielle Fox, Mielle Fox. I do a once a month virtual meetup if people want. It's called Unconditionally You. We just pick a topic every month and kind of get together and have a little convo. So that's kind of fun. All the numerology is sitting on the website. The podcast is called Energy of the Untamed Heart. That's on all the platforms. Just go Google it up. You'll find it. I'm happy to have a chat with anybody. I
Yeah.
love this. It has just opened the world. By the way, Dawn's going to be on my summit. So,
Uh-huh,
doing the
uh-huh.
Lead from the Heart Summit, and she gonna be on that. So that's gonna be
Yeah,
fun too, right?
it is
It's
gonna
gonna
be
be
fun.
great.
And when you had me on your podcast, I was like, "Oh, I gotta get her on mine. I gotta get her on here,"
Yeah,
because we had an in-depth conversation then too, but I'm so happy that you're here
yeah.
today.
I'd love it.
All
Thank you
right.
for having me. So much
You're
fun.
welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today for another episode of Catch Some Soulshine. You can watch Mielle on her own podcast. She also is available on all social medias, and I will be participating in her summit coming soon. For all of you that want to start your healing journey, just remember on Thursdays, I do release a free paint along on my YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out. Also, if you have not subscribed, you've got to hit that little bell. Please do so. That does help me reach more people on the platform. I do, as always, have free stuff available. So check the comments and you can pick up your free journal. You can also pick up a free 5x7 in my Rooted in Faith collection. So I will see you next week. Thanks for joining me.